You know, when we think about foreign policy, it's easy to picture this grand game of chess. We imagine world leaders as these master strategists, hunched over a global board, carefully calculating every single move and countermove. But is that really how it works?
Or is the truth a whole lot messier? A world filled with fuzzy information, gut feelings, and some really high-stakes gambles. Today, we're going to dive into the one theory that tries to make sense of all this madness, the idea of rationality.
Look, the appeal of thinking this way is huge. It gives us this illusion of control. If we assume leaders are rational, well, then we can start to model their behavior. We can try to predict what they'll do next, and maybe, just maybe, we can even nudge them in a certain direction. It's a really powerful and honestly a comforting idea. But, as we're about to see, it's only one piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so first things first, we need to get our heads around the basic toolkit. What does it actually mean for someone to be rational when we're talking about foreign policy?
At its core, rational choice theory makes one big assumption, that all actors, whether we're talking about a single person or an entire country, are what they call expected utility maximizing agents. It's a fancy term, but all it really means is that people try to get the best possible outcome for themselves, based on their goals and whatever information they have. Now, this is a really important point. In this context, a rational decision is not necessarily a good decision. It's not about being fair or moral, it's just about picking the option that seems to have the best cost-benefit ratio for you. An aggressive, even hostile move can be perfectly rational if the person making it believes the potential rewards are worth the risks.
And this whole theory really just hangs on three basic ideas. First, people know they're making a choice. Second, they can actually rank all their options from their favorite to their least favorite. And third, they pick the one at the very top of that list, the one they think will give them the best payoff. See, it's a nice, clean, logical framework.
So how does this super tidy theory actually work in the messy, complicated real world of international relations? Let's take a look.
The Montreal Protocol, the agreement to protect the ozone layer, is a fantastic example. For the Scandinavian countries, the rational choice was a no-brainer. Support it. Why? Well, they were highly vulnerable to ozone depletion, and the cost for them to cut their emissions was pretty low. But then you look at France. They were a huge producer of CFCs. For them, the calculation was the total opposite. Their vulnerability was lower, but the cost to change their whole industry was massive. So their rational choice was to resist the protocol. Two countries, two very different but equally rational choices, all based on their own self-interest.
But of course, it gets more complicated. Rationality isn't just about weighing your own costs and benefits. It's also about trying to guess what your opponent is going to do. A lot of the time, your best move depends entirely on what you think their next move will be. And that is the absolute heart of strategic thinking.
And boom, here we are, right back at that chess metaphor. This quote from the Cold War just shows you how deeply ingrained this idea was. American policymakers truly saw their Soviet rivals as these cold, calculating chess players, making every single move with perfect, rational precision. I mean, the entire strategy of nuclear deterrence was built on this very assumption.
To try and map out these complicated calculations, analysts turn to a really powerful tool called game theory. It's basically a way of drawing out strategic choices to see where they all might lead.
The most famous example, of course, is the prisoner's dilemma. So picture this. Two partners in crime get caught. The police put them in separate rooms so they can't talk to each other. And then the police offer each of them the exact same deal. Their choices are going to decide what happens to both of them.
All right, let's walk through this. Let's say you're prisoner A. Scenario 1. Your partner keeps their mouth shut. What's your best move? Betray them. You walk free. That's the best possible outcome. Okay, scenario 2. Your partner sings like a canary and betrays you. Now what's your best move? It's still to betray them, because that way you avoid the absolute worst-case sentence. You see the dilemma here? No matter what the other person does, your personal, rational choice is always to betray. But here's the paradox. When both prisoners act rationally, they both end up with a worse outcome than if they had just trusted each other and stayed quiet.
And that right there shows us a pretty big crack in the armor of pure rationality. Sometimes the most logical plans just don't work out. The real world isn't a perfect grid, which brings us to the limits of this whole approach.
So, the economist Herbert Simon came along and said, hey, humans operate with something he called bounded rationality. His point was that the real world is just way too complex, and our brains have too many limits for us to ever be perfectly rational.
So instead of analyzing every single possible option to find the absolute best or optimal one, we just look for an option that's good enough.
I absolutely love this analogy. A cat sitting by a fire isn't doing complex thermodynamic calculations to find the perfect distance for optimal warmth. Nope. It just scoots a little closer, maybe a little farther away, until it finds a spot that feels satisfactory. It satisfices. And in the same way, world leaders often aren't looking for the single perfect policy, they're looking for the first one they find that solves the problem without creating a bigger one.
But it's not just about having limited time or information. There's another massive factor at play. All the weird and wonderful ways our own brains secretly bend the rules of logic.
So there's this groundbreaking idea called prospect theory, which uncovered a really powerful cognitive bias called loss aversion. And the core idea is actually pretty simple, but man is it powerful. The psychological pain we feel from losing something is way, way stronger than the pleasure we get from gaining the exact same thing.
Think about it yourself. Which one of these feels more intense? Finding a $100 bill on the street, or realizing you just lost the $100 bill that was in your wallet? Yeah, for pretty much everyone, that sting of the loss is way more powerful. And this has huge implications for foreign policy. It can make leaders incredibly hesitant to risk losing something they already have.
And get this, our choices can be totally manipulated just by how the options are framed. In this famous experiment, people were asked how they deal with a deadly virus threatening 600 people. When the choices were framed around lives saved, most people went for the safe, guaranteed option. But when the exact same options were framed around people dying, most people suddenly switched and chose the risky gamble. The facts didn't change one bit, only the framing, and that completely flipped their rational choice on its head.
So where does that leave us? We've got pure, cold logic on one side and all these messy human biases on the other. Well, a more modern theory actually tries to combine them both into a single, more realistic model. It's called polyheuristic theory, and it basically suggests that making a big decision isn't one single action, but more of a two-step journey that mixes our mental shortcuts with good old-fashioned rational calculation.
Here's how it works. Step 1 is the heuristic phase. This is the gut check. Leaders use mental shortcuts to immediately throw out any options that are politically toxic. Anything that would tank their approval ratings or upset their base? Gone. It's a non-negotiable filter. Only then, after that first big cut, do they move on to the second, more rational phase. Now they take the handful of options left on the table and analyze them more carefully, trying to figure out which one offers the best possible outcome. It's a mix of political survival instinct and cold calculation.
And all this leaves us with a final, really interesting question to chew on. The next time we see a world leader make a move that looks completely irrational to us, are they truly being illogical? Or is it possible that we just don't understand their game, that we don't see what they count as a win, what they're terrified of losing, or which options they threw in the trash before they ever even sat down at the chessboard? It definitely changes how you watch the game.